I recently saw Nosferatu, and I was very much struck by Count Orlok's redesign, not only for the bold choices made for the character, but how those choices connect to director Robert Eggers' previous film, The Northman. Actor Max Schreck as Count Orlok in the 1922 original Nosferatu is so instantly recognizable that it's understandable why director Robert Eggers chose to give Orlok a new look. But this Orlok redesign isn't only to set itself apart from the original, it's also part of Eggers' process of using real history to inform the details of his films. The trailers, posters, and other promotional images have intentionally obscured Orlok to entice viewers into seeing him for the first time on the big screen for themselves. However, I will be talking about this new look here, so keep that in mind if you still want to be surprised.
Spoiler alert.
Scoot, scoot.
You may have noticed from some of the promotional shots that the Count now has a side-swept tuft of black hair on his usually bald head. If you've seen the film, you know that this distinctive hairdo is paired with a thick black mustache. Eggers did this for multiple reasons. Count Orlok is based on Count Dracula, who is described as having a mustache in Bram Stoker's original novel, because Dracula himself was based on Vlad Tepes, aka Vlad the Impaler, the legendary former voivode of Wallachia, who also had a mustache. Orlok is also an Eastern European nobleman from the late Middle Ages, and all of those guys had mustaches or some kind of facial hair. But this specific hairstyle of a long lock of hair with the rest shaved off is called an osladets. Usually paired with a bushy mustache, it was popularized by early Ukrainian Cossacks, and that's largely who it's associated with to this day. It also spread to other parts of the Carpathian region, like Wallachia, which is now Romania, and Hungary, where it became popular among the nobility. If you look up pictures of nobles from that era and region, you're going to see a lot of mustaches and shaved heads. Specifically, I want to show you these illustrations. These are from Italian artist Cesare Vasellio's 1590 book, The Clothing of the Renaissance World. I'm not going to try to say that in Italian, but it collects the outfits of men and women of different classes and backgrounds from all around the known world at that time. Look at this guy, he's wearing a poop emoji hat. These are illustrations of a Croatian horseman and a Croatian-Hungarian noble. In some reprintings, the noble also has a mustache, and voila, they're both Count Orlok now. Straight up, exactly what Count Orlok looks like in the film, like holy shit, that's just him. Look at him. Not only that, but the Middle Ages and chivalry had a huge resurgence in popularity during the Victorian era that Nosferatu takes place in. So it would not surprise me in the least to learn that Eggers himself used these specific reference photos. They are eerily close to the final version of Orlok. But here's where I had my little Jimmy Neutron brain blast. If you've ever seen Eggers' previous film, the Viking epic The Northman, starring Peter Skarsgård, you may remember a ship captain from the end of the movie portrayed by Ralph Ineson, the final cameo in a film full of great cameos. Ineson's character has that same osladets hairstyle. He seems to be the only member of his crew with that hairstyle. He's supposed to be a Rus Viking. These were Norsemen who traveled further east into the Eurasian steppe region and developed their own separate cultural influences in the early Middle Ages. The character's name is Vladimir. He's got dark hair and a low, booming voice and that same Slavic pronunciation that Count Orlok has.
I was expecting more of Fjolnir's men. His son was to join us.
The midnight hour has passed.
It's also worth noting that Eggers has stated that while his Orlok is not explicitly Vlad Tepes, he once had a name, and that name is now lost to time. I wouldn't go as far as to say that Vladimir is unquestionably Count Orlok back when he was alive, mainly because he has a pattern of runes tattooed on his neck, and though Orlok is mostly shrouded in shadow, as far as I can tell, he has no such markings on his neck. But I don't think that Count Orlok's similarity to Vladimir is mere coincidence. At the very least, he's a suggestion of who Count Orlok may have been as a living man, or his possible lineage. The hair, the tattoo, and the distinctive cap and cape that set him apart from the rest of his crew may all be ways of signifying that he's a captain, but frankly, it's more fun to suspect otherwise. Robert Eggers wanted to remake Nosferatu for a long time. This movie was announced in 2015, and I imagine he had this design or something like it in mind for a very long time. Bill Skarsgård was originally supposed to play the male protagonist, Thomas Hutter. He was not considered for Orlok until much later. So I have to believe that Innocent was at least considered for Orlok at one point in time, based on his deep, bass-heavy voice alone. Both Eggers and Skarsgård have stated that Count Orlok is around 300 years old.
I also got a backstory from Robert about Orlok. He's 300 years old.
Had a long backstory then.
And his clothing is representative of Carpathian rulers of the 16th century.
That coat with the arms like down to his ankles, like, well, that's insane, you know? Like, but that's what they wore because it was cool to wear your coat over your shoulders in that region. And by the way, I have all the money in the world to have sleeves that reach the floor because I'm rich. So,
But his contract is written in Dacian, a dead language of ancient Romania, or at least an approximation of Dacian. Orlok's familiar, Hernak, even invokes the ancient Dacian deity Zelmaxis at one point. The Count also speaks Dacian in the film. It died in the 6th century, meaning it would have been long gone even before the era that the Northman takes place in. Dacians identified with wolves, a warrior trope we also see with the Norse and the Northmen. Orlok can't transform into a wolf in this version like he can in the originals and in Dracula. Instead, he controls 3 black wolves as a makeshift Cerberus to torment Thomas Hutter with. His casket is covered in what are called Dacian Dracos, which are serpents with wolf heads. Here they are eating each other's tails in what is called an Ouroboros. It wraps around a 7-pointed star to form the Orlok House Sigil, which was designed by Eggers himself. Also worth noting is that the real Vlad Tepes's Order of the Dragon sigil features an Ouroboros of a dragon choking itself with its own tail along with a red cross. What's cool about Orlok's sigil being a double Ouroboros is that Nosferatu is an adaptation of Dracula, and this film is an adaptation of an adaptation, so 2 serpents eating each other's tails seems very appropriate here. It may be that Orlok was the identity taken by Vladimir or one of his descendants 300 years ago as a dark sorcerer, but his true age, just like his true name, is unknown. But just for fun, let's try to explain how Vladimir could have become Count Orlok. When we last see Vladimir, he's on a ship with Olga the Witch, who is completely heartbroken after having been abandoned by Amalith, the film's protagonist. Olga casts a spell, calling the winds to take her home. So let's get really weird for a second and talk about a completely different movie. Willem Dafoe was apparently also considered to play Count Orlok in this version of Nosferatu, which would have been a bold choice considering the fact that Willem Dafoe was nominated for an Oscar for his vampire, pretending to be an actor, pretending to be a vampire version of Count Orlok from the metafictional 2000s dark comedy, Shadow of the Vampire. In that film, the original Nosferatu is made by casting a real vampire, played by Dafoe. And when that character is asked how he became a vampire, he blames a woman who he says cursed him and left him forever.
I had a picture of her in my mind. But no, I no longer even have that.
Now, back to the ending of The Northman. Think about it. It was the year 914. Olga the Witch has twins on the way and a freshly dead baby daddy, and we're shown that she and the captain speak the same language and are likely from the same part of what would eventually become the Ukraine. They are both living in an immensely patriarchal society, and she needed protection. And also in this era, and in Robert Eggers' films in general, magic is something largely associated with women. It's explicitly stated in The Northman that men must never seek the secrets of women, but heed them always. Imagine that Vladimir and Olga are together for a time, until Vladimir gets a little too familiar with her sorcery despite Olga's warnings. He starts using magic for militaristic pursuits, and as retribution for desecrating her sacred relationship to earth magic, he is punished with the curse of the vampire. She may have even tricked him into giving himself the curse, telling him that it would grant him immortality. I imagine she'd teach him stuff like commanding animals or light hypnosis, but refused to teach him how to control the weather. We are shown in Nosferatu that Count Orlok, much like Dracula in the novel, does know how to control the weather. Orlok casts a wind spell while he's sailing on the ship in the middle of the film, so this could explain why Vladimir would go from Ukraine to Romania. There's a legend that hidden in the Carpathian Mountains in Transylvania is a black magic school called the Scholomance, where a person can learn to control weather and other powerful spells. Dracula is also said to have been a student in Bram Stoker's novel. You study there for 7 years or so and you graduate as a Solomonari, a powerful wizard who can cause storms and summon dragons. Count Orlok might be the title that Vladimir was given as a sorcerer at that school. In Romanian folklore, there are a few different ways of becoming a vampire or strigoi, but I would guess that Orlok was chosen especially by the demonic forces that operate this school to be resurrected as one of the undead. I'm not sure how or when he would actually die. Maybe he extends his life through magic, but I think it would be cool if his death had something to do with Olga's daughter, the Maiden King that's prophesied by Bjork earlier on in the Northman. Then the demon Belial would resurrect him as a strigoi to haunt the earth for the rest of eternity, thus completing the vampire's curse. Not my best, but I felt like a certain portion of people watching this were going to want a little fanfic detour, so there you go. I think every Nosferatu has its Dracula counterpart. You got the OGs from 1922 and 1931, respectively. You got the 70s versions from Hammer and Herzog. And now we finally have a proper companion to Francis Ford Coppola's 1992 Dracula. Also, Shadow of the Vampire and Dracula 2000 can go together because they both don't count. I really enjoyed the new Count Orlok. He's a traditional vampire. He looks like a reanimated corpse. The psychosexual nature of the story, along with the tuft of hair, made him look like a big, gross, diseased Wang in some of those profile shots. I also like that he still has those pointy ears, but this time around, it's because they're all chewed up from the rats in his coffin. Brilliant detail. This version of Nosferatu was a lot more character-driven than the others, and I dug that a lot because I really related to the characters. I related to Ellen. I know what it's like to, call out from loneliness and depression, and to have something or someone evil answer that call, and also feeling like you have to pay for that for the rest of your life. I also know what it's like to be Thomas, to be so ambitious that you become naive and wanting to help someone that you may not fully be able to understand. I relate to Frederick. Vampires aren't real, so if they were, I think most of us would respond like Frederick. You feel like the only sane person in the room, and once you finally accept the vampires are real after one of them takes everything you love away, you would likely be trading in that knowledge for your own sanity. Of course I relate to von Franz, the eccentric with the wild crackpot theories that turn out to be true, but no one wants to listen to him all the same. That's my dude. But I also relate to Count Orlok. I relate to being a big, gross, lonely, insatiable, night-dwelling weirdo who can't be a part of society and who could only watch it from afar anymore. And one of the things I loved about this new version of Count Orlok is how ornate his casket is. All I could think was, who made that thing? Once upon a time, somebody somewhere put a whole lot of craft and effort and care into the Count's casket. I mean, he must have had subjects, he must have had a council, other people in his life. Orlok watched the world where he used to matter slowly erode into obscurity over centuries. His resurrection was probably this huge celebration for his followers. The casket suggests that it was all part of this big ceremony. He He'd have all these expectations of returning from the grave as a god on earth, but then he comes back to life and he's reduced to this thing, this shell of a human. He takes these pained breaths whenever he's speaking, probably because it's the only time he actually has to draw breath anymore. Canuck calls it at the beginning of the movie. The dude is falling apart.
He has one foot in the grave, so to speak. He's too infirm to travel.
Okay, I know that's a joke and that Count Orlok looks physically strong, but you usually see Nosferatu traipsing around at nightfall, casually carrying a whole-ass coffin full of soil under one arm. Conspicuously, there are no such displays of strength in the 2024 version. It's Canuck's job to move the coffin this time around. Without magic, he'd be completely worthless. He sends wolves after Thomas because it's not like he could actually chase anybody himself. He can't even make it all the way up a flight of stairs without teleporting. I think that he knows, just as well as Ellen and Von Franz, that Ellen could be the one to take him out, and he is selfishly haunting her into doing it because he wants out. That's just my take. There are people who might say I shouldn't be so sympathetic to a possessive, tyrannical hellspawn, and like, who are you, my therapist? But seriously, I do believe that there is complexity and humanity trapped under all of that tailored fur and rotting flesh.
Unfortunately, the one person who can understand this side of her is a demon, is a vampire, is Orlok, and so you have this like kind of tragic demon lover story that is a love triangle.
Now all he's got is Herr Canuck, who is more of a utensil to him than a person to relate to, and Ellen, who gets him, but understandably would prefer to keep him in her past. So, you know, you watch a Robert Eggers movie and you think to yourself, it would suck to be in a 1630s homestead, or it would suck to be trapped in a lighthouse in the 1890s, or it would suck to be on the wrong end of one of those Viking raids in the 900s. But when I walked out of Nosferatu, all I could think to myself was how much it would suck to be a vampire.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I enjoy these things that I talk about on a base level, but I also enjoy dissecting them and looking for clues in the finer details. Ed Norton was recently reticent to talking about his acting process portraying the folk singer Pete Seeger in the Bob Dylan biopic A Complete Unknown. He said, I kind of think that we might be getting into this era where it's like the old thing of a snake that eats its own tail. I think we're getting so hung up on process and the behind the scenes thing that we're blowing the magic trick of it all. I actually think we're starting to have this tendency to talk about how we did it before we even put it out. I had an experience recently where there was something I was sort of interested in seeing, and I saw so many goddamn clips about the makeup process. I was just like, it's just cooked for me now. They've cooked it. Like, leave them alone, let them watch the piece, because I'm an audience member, and I want mystery, I want illusion. Here's the deal, he's not wrong. I don't think it's the artist's job to give explicit explanations for what the audience just experienced, but I do feel like it's my job. I don't think my speculation spoils the magic trick. It's born out of my own curiosity, and my goal is to make others just as curious as I am. All this stuff is out there for everyone to see. I don't have any more access than the average person. I just happen to have a good education and some natural instincts that you can't teach. If you're new here, just know I be finding shit. I do believe that certain fans of Robert Eggers maybe hold his process in a little too high regard. He's brilliant and he's cultured, but he also enjoys schlock horror and Star Wars and comic books, and I think that stuff is all over his work too. So if the whole connected universe fan theory thing I'm doing seems like something he'd never do to you, just a reminder that Universal Horror is the birthplace of movie crossovers. I'm not saying that I'm absolutely right, but I am easily within the realm of possibility here. Anya Taylor-Joy, who played Olga the Witch in The Northman and also Thomasin the Witch in The Witch, was originally cast to play Ellen in Nosferatu, who has her own predisposition to the supernatural. All three of those characters could easily be from the same family tree. Other filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, Steven Soderbergh, Kevin Smith, and Rick Famuyiwa have all used elements that cross over from film to film on occasion. You also see it with authors like Mark Twain, Kurt Vonnegut, Stephen King, and Anne Rice. I might be overworking to justify my reasoning here, but these days, for some people, crossover only means wannabe MCU franchise. I don't know why Vladimir and Orlok share similarities, but I doubt that it was done for no reason. That being said, I welcome your Eggersverse jokes. Pitch me a movie where Von Franz comes in possession of a magic conch shell that summons the mermaid from the lighthouse. Go nuts. Eggers' next movie is about a werewolf, by the way. Why is that significant here? Apart from the obvious, because if you look very closely at the Yggdrasil-like family tree in The Northman, there's a f***ing werewolf hiding in the background. As cool as these connections are, I gotta say, the real revelation for me in all of this was the Cesar Vaselio book. I'm pretty convinced this was used as a source for the film. We may never know, but the resemblance is uncanny. An aspect of Orlok's design I haven't touched on yet are the xenophobic features of the character. They're present in Dracula, and they're arguably heightened in Nosferatu with Orlok's design and his plague rats recalling propaganda against Eastern Europeans like Jews, Slavs, and Romani people. Thankfully, that turned out to be a temporary addition to modern vampire lore, but the Foreign Menace angle is still inherently present in all subsequent Dracula adaptations. I think the 2024 Nosferatu makes it more about modernity being terrorized by the brutal past it was built on top of. The irony this time around is that the pogroms and communal violence that led to many of these groups immigrating to the UK in the 1800s and influenced Dracula in the first place had been committed over centuries by guys like the current version of Count Orlok. And that might be intentional too, but I'm no historian. I do my best, but I'm sure there's a lot of stuff I'm getting wrong. My degree is in art. Much of my understanding of history is framed through that lens. Feel free to correct me in the comments. I want to shout out the channels Book and Hearth and Crowhag. If you want to hear about Romanian folklore from Romanian women with real expertise in mythology, I recommend both of them. I'll link their videos I watched to help me make this video in the description. I'd like to thank $10 patrons Bramblefish, Christopher Kolish, Dean Accardi, Sunshine, Muchu Media, Lauren, Mike B, Leah, Bill, Turn to Page X, Michael, Alani, Mocha Medics, and Francisco Rose. Deepest thanks to everyone who contributes to this show. You guys have been truly incredible. Thank everyone for your time who watched this far. I hope you return for the next one. Until then, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, join my Patreon, and tell all your hot goth babe friends about this video. Whatever time you are watching this, I hope you have a dark and stormy night. Farewell. Sorry for shooting this on the webcam. I need a cable for my camera, and it's not here yet, and I didn't want to wait. So, here we are.
I want you to bring me the can. I said I want you to bring me the can.